Hey everybody, welcome to today's lecture, and I hope that you are all doing well, or at least as well as we can be doing under these circumstances, and that the reboot of your semesters has gone mostly smoothly. So I thought I'd start with just giving you, kind of maybe each time we do this actually, a little update as to my day and kind of where I'm at. It's okay if you don't care, but I do think it's helpful during times like these for all of us to kind of hear about how we're all coping, And to that end, I really wanted to say thank you to all of you who posted on the open thread discussion board either Tuesday or Monday. It was great to hear from you. And I would encourage all of you to do that, especially if you feel like you have some questions about kind of best practices or things that you should be doing right now. So for me, I'm recording this on Tuesday night and spent most of my day, basically all of my day, chasing my kids around my house and my yard. And thankfully, we have a backyard, and the weather, of course, was beautiful today for the first time in a long time. And I was trying to focus on kind of small things to be thankful for, like more time with family and getting to spend some really quality time with my kids, which is something that I don't get to do enough. So, anyway, it was, a day filled with scary news, of course, but also a day filled with small enjoyments, at least on my end. So, speaking of discussion board number one, I want to talk briefly about what I'm expecting and the details of the assignment. So you're going to have three of these, as I'm sure you've seen. And I went ahead and updated the grades in Gradebook, the assignments in Canvas. And so the three discussion boards are now on Canvas. They're worth 10% of your grade each. And the one that's due on Friday is not really about anything that we've been talking about in our class, except well, I take that back. We have talked a lot about media habits in class. And so, really, I'm asking you to sort of put the microscope on your own media habits, especially over the last couple of weeks, and tell me what they are, how they've changed. And obviously, like any other writing assignment in our class, I expect you to use complete sentences, use paragraphs when appropriate, and make sure that your written communication is as flawless as possible. So that's due on Friday. Make sure that you do it. If something is getting in the way of you completing these assignments, I need to hear from you sooner rather than later. All right, so on today's agenda, we're going to talk through some stuff on political advertising, kind of the generalities behind it, how it has tended to work, and then political advertising with respect to the 2016 Clinton and Trump election and the upcoming 2020 presidential election. Like so much else like so many other sort of facets of American politics, the Trump campaign really has, or the Trump presidency and for the Trump campaign originally has sort of upended what we know about political advertising. And well, this is very true in the realm of advertising. It's also true that because technology has sort of developed at such a fast pace, particularly in the modern era, it's true that almost every presidential election sees advancements in campaign and advertising technology that were not around or were not utilized during the prior election. And this is in large part because presidential elections only happen every 4 years, right? So it would be weird if we expected the 2016 presidential election, regardless of who was running, to use political advertising in the same way as 2012 or as 2008. And so there are some sort of inflection points that are really important. We'll talk about one of them in tonight's lecture, which was this viral Yes We Can video, that kind of music video actually done by will.i.am of the Black Eyed Peas that went viral during the Obama campaign. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the Trump campaign in particular has kind of really changed the game in terms of placing ads on Facebook to mobilize their supporters. And so we'll talk about what those ads look like and what they've done. And then we'll get to the Wallstone article on the Yes We Can video. But first, some sort of basics on political advertising. So, political ads, at least on television, and we'll talk about what they are on the internet. And even the internet is too broad of a term because social media is different than YouTube and is different than, we'll talk through some differences there. But at least on television, political ads are targeted messages that are designed to be delivered to a mixed audience of supporters, opponents, and the undecided. And it's really interesting because if you think about the evolution of mass media, particularly from, let's say, when TV was first kind of gaining a foothold as a dominant feature in American life, let's say in the 1960s. Again, I keep going back to this example, but there were three channels, right, in the 1960s. And so if you were liberal, if you were conservative, if you were apolitical, everybody was watching the same three channels. And now, of course, the people who are watching whatever Duck Dynasty are going to be very different than the people who are watching nightly news on PBS, right? And so politicians now can target their advertising on TV to certain demographics much more so than in the past. And we see advertisers, of course, can do this too. So very rarely during a single show would you see, for example, an advertisement for, Depends and also one for kids cereal, right? Because there's very little television programming that brings together the young and the old. Of course, the Super Bowl is an example. But besides that, young kids are probably not going to be watching Tucker Carlson on Fox News at night, and older Americans, unless they're grandparents who are babysitting, are not going to be watching Wild Kratts in the afternoon. So, while TV advertising is more targeted than it used to be, it is still not as targeted as we'll see as online advertising. But nevertheless, political ads are designed to do two things. And again, this goes back to sort of there are two ways to win elections, right? You can persuade your potential voters to support you. You can try and persuade people who are on the fence, but who nevertheless could be drawn into considering themselves your supporter. So you could try to get those people. On the other hand, you could also use political ads to tamp down support for your opponent, to discourage your opponent's potential supporters from crossing the line into being full-scale supporters, or your candidate's potential supporters from doing something like volunteering for the candidate or doing something in addition to voting. And so we saw this was really on display in the 2016 presidential election. And I know that some of y'all were probably not of voting age back 4 years ago, but Hillary Clinton ran a lot of ads focused on the sort of unpresidential character of Donald Trump and his character problems. And in hindsight, a lot of people who have analyzed the content of her messaging and what did and did not resonate think that she should have been far more focused on what she could offer the country rather than what were Trump's limitations. The fact of the matter is, she wasn't going to convince anybody, right? Because everybody knew Donald Trump in 2016. And there were probably some people who had an impression of Hillary Clinton, and of course people knew Hillary Clinton too, but there were probably some people that had an impression of her that could have had that impression changed had she focused a bit more on her own policies and on her own reasons for running, but nevertheless she did not. What's interesting about the Trump campaign is that despite being elected in November of 2016 and him taking office in January of 2017, it really has not stopped with the advertising just because he was elected. In 2019, for example, just last year, the Trump campaign spent $20 million on 218,000 Facebook ads. And there's a guy whose name is Brad Pascal, who is the digital director of the 2016 campaign. He's actually a Texan. He was from San Antonio. And as an example of kind of an improbable rise to the very top of American politics. 6 or 7 years ago, he basically had a one-man business making websites for companies, and he was based out of San Antonio, and he was pretty successful. He ended up being pretty successful. He didn't start off very successful, but the way that he got tied into the Trump campaign is, I think probably 5 or 6 years ago, some of the Trump properties or something associated with the Trump organization needed a website to be revamped. This was not political, this was a commercial website. And he had received word from somebody he knew that a way to get into Trump's orbit was essentially on any project that came forth just to be the low bidder, because they were always going to go with the low bidder. And that's exactly what he did. He was the low bidder on this project by a long shot. And so he ended up designing this website and then continued to design websites and then was brought on full time as the digital director of the 2016 presidential campaign. And in sort of recognition that what he did in 2016 really worked, the Trump campaign has since promoted him to campaign manager for the 2020 election. So before he was just in charge of digital outreach, and now he's in charge of the entire campaign. And obviously, as with any political campaign, re-election is going to be the primary goal. But there are some additional goals that the campaign has that service that re-election goal. And in fact, Pascal himself has said that the campaign is all about data collection. And the more data that they can sort of track on people who have attended Trump rallies, who have hit like on a Facebook ad, who have shared a Facebook ad, who have retweeted a Facebook ad, the more data that they can then sort of scrape from those people's sometimes public profiles, or what they did in 2016 in partnership with Cambridge Analytica, the company out of the UK that scraped people's private Facebook profiles to give information to the Trump campaign. What they can do with that data is really interesting because they can micro-target advertisements. And these micro-targeted ads can be tweaked very, very quickly. And if you think about it, this is kind of very interesting from our perspective, because what it allows the Trump campaign to do is essentially run, and other campaigns can do this too, but what Facebook allows is them to run in real time many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands experiments to determine what is the most effective form of messaging, right? So we talked about how, like, a survey experiment, for example, you can show somebody a stimulus and then you can say, did this make you feel happy, angry, sad, blah, blah, blah. Nobody is doing that after watching a Trump ad on Facebook, clearly. But what the campaign can understand very quickly is there are some measures, there are some dependent variable measures that get at how people liked the ad. And of course, the like button is one, sharing it is another. On Twitter, of course, likes and retweets and replies. But what these platforms do is they give candidates in real time information about how well their ads are playing. And this is a very, very valuable thing. This, it's really difficult when you put forth a static ad on TV that would run in the middle of an episode of Friends on a Thursday night 20 years ago. And that ad is out in the community. And yeah, it's probably been focus grouped and focus tested. But once it's out there, you hope it plays well, but you don't really know how it plays, except anecdotally. And social media allows campaigns to really understand in real time how their ads are hitting. And this is a quite novel development in the world of political advertising. The New York Times, in a recent study, found that the Trump campaign, for example, ran over 2,000 ads on Facebook between January and August of 2019 of last year that used the word invasion. So clearly they understood, and if you just Google search this, you can see many, many, many myriad examples, but they understood that among their base, the word invasion plays really well and gets people going. Another example, in January, the Trump campaign ran over 200 ads on Facebook that in some form or fashion claimed that the liberal media was going to censor Trump's re-election commercial that aired during the Super Bowl. And of course, it is illegal to censor political ads, so this would have never happened. It was a threat that was not actually a threat at all, but what it did is it riled up the base, which we have seen the Trump people are, of course, very good at doing. So this begs some questions, and one of the readings for today's class was about the role that Facebook should play in dealing with deliberately false or misleading advertisements, and whether they have a duty to pull that sort of content from their airways. And it's one thing to call something an invasion when it may not meet whatever criteria of an actual, I don't know even know if there is invasion criteria, right? But it's another thing altogether to post false or misleading information about health, for example, or false or misleading information about any number of things that are related to personal safety. And Facebook in January actually came out and said that it was not their job to censor misleading advertisements, and they've since sort of come around to the opposite view and have taken down um, some blatantly false ads. But I'd be interested, and of course, if we were in class, I could just ask you this right now, but of course, we're not together, so I don't know, feel free to post about it or something, but I'd be really interested to hear y'all's opinions about whether or not Facebook has a duty um, to pursue the truth. And if so, whose version of truth, right? This is some pretty tricky stuff, and it's worth kind of thinking about further. So, the internet, as compared to TV, although not social media, is what we call a motivated medium, meaning that viewers must have incentives, excuse me, to either go to a candidate's website or search for ads from the candidate on YouTube, right? As compared to television, where you're sitting on the couch and ads are just sort of coming to you like a hypodermic needle. But as a result, most web ads, again, web ads that are not on social media, are viewed by people who are either already interested or already committed to the candidate. On Facebook and Twitter, of course, things are different, right? Because ads can show up as promoted, although some users can opt out. Um, Ads can go viral for various reasons. But generally, we consider the internet to be a motivated medium and television to be an unmotivated medium, although social media like Facebook and Twitter kind of falls in the middle and can complicate things a little bit. Um, One interesting piece of research on this topic is done by a guy named Kevin Walston, who studied this viral video from the original Obama campaign in 2008. And Walston wanted to look at viral videos because in 2008, at least, they could be considered a combination of what we would consider traditional advertising and also social networking. And they were perceived, whether it's true or not, they were perceived as playing a large part, not only in Barack Obama's rise in notoriety and fame and popularity in 2007 and 2008, but of course his ultimate victory in the 2008 presidential election. So in this piece of research, Kevin Walston looked at will.i.am's 2008 Yes We Can music video. And if we were in class right now, I would play it for you, but unfortunately we're not, but you can still find it online. And he found that bloggers, sort of influential bloggers within the political sort of news ecology, as well as Obama campaign staffers, played really crucial roles in convincing people to watch the video. And I think this is really interesting because we think when a video goes viral, or maybe at one point we thought this, maybe I thought this, maybe y'all don't think this at all, but when a video goes viral, it just happens organically. But of course, that's not the case, right? We know that decisions are made along the way, and apologies for the viral metaphor here. This might hit a little bit too close to home, but we know that certain things affect the way that something can go viral, just like certain things can affect the way that a virus spreads. What Walston found is that traditional journalists, so the gatekeepers of the mass media, your late night hosts, your Chris Matthewses of the world, your political columnists and newspapers had very little influence on the levels of online viewership, the levels of blog discussion, or campaign support of a viral video. And so Walston's hypothesis, he says, I predict that online views, blog discussions, campaign statements, and mainstream media coverage are likely to be deeply intertwined, and each probably exerts a strong influence on the others. So you can think of this in terms of media effects research, right? And again, this is what makes this field interesting to study, but also difficult because it is not a linear relationship. So who decides to view the video, how it's discussed online, what the campaign thinks about videos, and how mainstream media covers these videos. It's not like one thing happens, then another thing happens, and another thing happens. Instead, these groups are interacting, discussing, feeding off of one another. So, put differently, a viral political video is most likely the result of a complex and multi directional interplay between the actions of internet users, bloggers, campaign members, and journalists. And what this suggests to me, what Walston's doing here, is trying to put an agenda setting spin on viral videos and on the spread of these things on the internet, right? And so the agenda setting hypothesis, what we would typically think agenda setting is, would imply that the mainstream media coverage of an online political video would increase the number of people who watch it, right? So in 2008, if a video is going viral, right, and oftentimes as they did back then, it was through email. But if a video was going viral in 2008, it wouldn't reach a subset of the potential viewing audience until somebody from the New York Times or from the Dallas Morning News or from Channel 8 or from PBS or from MSNBC or whatever ran a segment on it, right? And that's what would then lift a viral video to the next level. Now, we know that this probably is actually not the case, right, when it comes to the internet, because things go viral all the time without any help from the mainstream media. This is, in fact, one reason why the internet is a scary thing to legacy media companies. But Walston asked the questions of what about agenda setting and blogging? And blogging, actually, even the term blogging now sounds a little bit outdated, but you had in 2008 some very influential political commentators, particularly on both sides, but on the left, who were finding their voice, many of them sort of first working on Howard Dean's presidential campaign in 2004. So you had some online people who were very online. They, of course, would have been very active on Twitter had Twitter been up and running back then. But regardless, Walston's interested in what role these people had in amplifying the message. And he argues that this agenda setting relationship, when we're talking about bloggers and not mainstream media members, should hold up for a couple reasons. So the first is that political bloggers, in his mind at least, rarely did any original reporting. And they tended to rely on established media outlets for information. So if MSNBC, for example, ran a segment on a viral video, then the bloggers would pick up on that and discuss that on the internet. And secondly, they are likely to discuss events presented in news coverage because they consider themselves a fifth estate. The media in America has often billed itself as the fourth estate, so the fourth sort of thing, part of government. This comes from French form of government and French Revolution, but nevertheless, the media would consider themselves to be the fourth estate. And bloggers and sort of this online commentariat consider themselves to be the fifth estate. So what are some differences between bloggers and journalists? And this is sort of true for anybody who's very active on Twitter now. And again, sort of what we consider to be blogging, mainstream blogging, has kind of gone away. It's been replaced, of course, by other means, whether it's people on YouTube or TikTok or whoever, and trying to sort of influence public opinion. But despite being different in a lot of ways, bloggers, of course, are mostly non-professional. Journalists, of course, are credentialed and trained. They face a common problem, which is that the number of potentially important topics in the political universe is basically infinite. And yet the amount of time, energy, and resources for covering them is not. And so as a result, they make decisions based on a common consideration, which is what content will attract the largest audience possible. And of course, here money is a sort of very telling and very important consideration on the internet as it is in legacy media establishments as well. And so, what Walston uses to explore this is the Yes We Can, Will I Am video. He systematically studies the relationship between viewership, blog discussion, campaign statements, and media coverage, and this means measuring a lot of different variables over time. He measures web hits of the video on YouTube. He measures the number of blog links that led to the video, tracking this stuff on a website called Technorati. And he measures the interaction with the campaign by counting the number of times that the video was linked on Obama's official campaign blog and mentioned in emails from the campaign. Of course, this is a pretty crude measure. Now we could easily count statements put forth on Twitter by people who work for the campaign or who are considered surrogates for the campaign. But again, the platform of Twitter was not in play here. He measures mainstream media coverage by using a daily count of the number of articles printed in US newspapers and appearing on TV news. And he finds that support from the campaign itself was really crucial in making this video go viral. Bloggers also played an important role in drawing the attention of internet users, as well as journalists to the video. And large number of views that the video received online was important to its ability to attract attention outside of the internet ecosphere. And there was really no evidence that journalists contributed to the video going viral, even though once it had gone viral, they covered it extensively. So there are some important implications of this research. One is that its conclusions contributed to the emerging literature on the consequences of political blogging, suggesting that they're high. And in fact, I think that we can extend these implications to the Twitter sphere and other places where the sort of political elite gather to discuss. And it also contributes to agenda building by detailing which factors drive journalists to cover the online world, right? So, what is it about something that leads a journalist to cover it? And it also, of course, contributes to studies of political campaigns by highlighting the role that campaign actions can play in promoting supporter generated content online. And future research, he says, well, we should study some other political videos to see if these interactions still hold up. And we also need to see and look at data on how videos are passed from person to person. And again, this just shows you how fast this field moves, but through email, instant messaging, which of course was a thing when I was in high school, on AOL or on America Online Instant Messenger, which my generation refers to as AIM. And also, of course, later, 10 years or so later, on places like GChat, which again don't exist anymore. And now, of course, social networks tend to dominate the communication space. So, what factors lead bloggers / people on Twitter and elsewhere to discuss certain videos and ignore others? And finally, what impact do these videos have on members of the mass public, right? Walston looked at the influence on the media, on the campaign, and bloggers, but not voters. So what did this video do to undecideds, for example? What do viral videos about Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump do to potential voters in the present day? And that is it for tonight or today. You're probably going to be watching this, hopefully the morning of Wednesday, March 25th. I really thank you for watching and for trying to keep up with the readings and for doing what you do under these really trying times. If you have any questions about the course, about the discussion board, which is due on Friday, any questions about anything, please do not hesitate to reach out. Also, I hope that you have been going to TWU's dedicated coronavirus webpage. I know that a lot of y'all are facing some really potentially trying economic situations at the moment. The university, the chancellor, has set aside a fund of $100,000 to help support students in any way that we can who need help at the moment. So if you think that this fund could play an important role in your life, please don't hesitate to apply for it. And also, if you have lost your job, please know that you have some options. Hopefully, this stimulus bill that Congress is about to pass um, will include some monthly payments to help you get by. And also, of course, you can apply for unemployment benefits through the state of Texas as well. So that's it for me tonight. And I hope that all of you have a great day and stay happy, healthy, and safe.